is 11:30 on got it. Okay, it is 11:30 on November 14th, 2023. I call this meeting of the Medication Safety Committee to order. Do I call roll? Do we need to call roll?
Uh, yes, you need to, somebody needs to call roll.
Okay.
I can do it just as easily as you.
I
Um,
have I have the list here in front of me. I can call it off. Um, Commissioner Barry here. Commissioner Fowler,
Here.
Mike Twiggs, presiding steward.
Mike Twiggs wasn't sure if he'd be able to make it. He's doing
Mike not here.
required continuing education, but he might try to stop in if he can get away.
Oh, I got it. Tom Everman present.
Here, present.
And thank you. And Connie Wynn present.
Present.
Okay. Let me pull up the agenda here then. Okay, so we're gonna start off today unless so approval of the meeting agenda. We need to take a, is that just me and Commissioner Fowler take a vote on that?
Actually, all five of us are members of the committee, so yes.
So we all, I see. Okay. Um, Karen was very kind and sent me over the Oregon rules for meetings and everything, and I read over it, and so it's parliamentary procedure, and it suggested adopting one of several. I don't think we need to do that, but it did say we can be flexible with how we apply the rules of parliamentary procedure. Do we want to have a motion for this sort of thing? Do we just want to say, hey, let's take a vote, and if anybody has an issue with it, we can move to discussion? Does anyone have preferences on that? Okay, then let's just have a vote on it. All in favor of approving the meeting agenda? Aye.
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 Okay, all opposed? Old business. This is a new thing we're all doing together here. I believe this committee has existed in the past. This is the first time under the current structure. Is that right, Connie?
That is correct. And there is no old
Okay.
business at this point, since we haven't had a
Okay.
meeting for some time.
Perfect. So we're all in kind of a good place to start, and I look forward to us figuring this thing out together as a group. Please forgive me my trespasses ahead of time, and feel free to correct me if I stumble a little bit. But I'll try to do the best I can as the chair. Should we just move on to new business? Does anyone have uh, anything that they'd like to introduce to the agenda last minute? We could take a vote on adding something if someone had on the committee had something burning they'd like to add. Okay. So the HISA strategic response review. Where would we like to start with that?
Commissioner Barry, I can start by introducing why this is on here, and we can go from there. So basically, after the fatalities that we had at the end of Grants Pass, Commissioner Beckston recommended that this committee look at this and consider these strategic responses or ideas as part of our action plan. So this is being presented to you for consideration and review.
Thank you very much, Connie.
So perhaps you'd like me to kind of go through these and we can discuss as a group if any of these are things that we do or do not want to incorporate or consider.
Yes, that'd be wonderful.
Okay, so the first one, and again, I'm just going to read these off. There are very different size organizations out there. What somebody like Kentucky does with many tracks that runs year round is not going to be the same thing that we might do in Oregon. So let's take that with a grain of salt on each one of these and look at what they're saying and determine if they make sense or do not make sense for us. The first one is create a track surface advisory group. And for this one, and I don't know, unfortunately, Mike isn't able to be on the call right now, but we do have people here that can talk about this. And if we needed to, we could even ask the public. We have Rod Lowe here, who would be an excellent person that we could request to talk on the subject. Since we don't have a lot of tracks, I'm not sure that it really makes a lot of sense to have a track service advisory committee for us. I do think, however, it is important that we have an expert come out to the tracks as we have in the past. We've had Mr. Woods come out to our tracks and investigate and look at the tracks and help the tracks get online and determine how much they need to change their tracks surfaces before the races. Last year, he was not able to come out to many of them because of illness. But beyond that, if not him, perhaps we look at someone else if he's not able to help us with that in the future. And if I may, I'd like to call on Rod Lowe with his expertise in the area and get his feedbacks and suggestions on that.
Yeah, I agree with Connie in her assessment. We have used Steve Woods in the past. Steve Wood is still on our payroll as an advisory person. He's a track expert, built racetracks all over the country, has worked 50 years in the industry, and that's all he's done is tracks and built tracks. And he's a consultant for a lot of different tracks, Colorado, New Mexico. He goes to Australia. He's a great source for that. He did have some back issues this last year. My last conversation with him, that's better. He's got that under control, and that I think any outside of that, trying to create track committees, we have done that in the past just on a local basis. So we have a safety committee meeting at Grants Pass at our race meet, where we once a week we bring in a jockey, we bring in the stewards, we bring in the track crew, we bring in horseman representatives, and we all discuss the safety issues at the racetrack, what happened that week, what needs to be done differently, what people are seeing. Jockeys are a great source to know how that track is really doing. And so we do have a committee locally that we do that on a weekly basis. On top of that, then we have Steve Wood, who is the expert that is a phone call away. And if he has to come and see the track, he'll jump on a plane and come and examine the track if he needs to. So I think for our size of facilities and our tracks, I think we're doing, most of what we can do. I'm not saying that there isn't room for improvement, but I feel like we've tried to do the best we can with the resources that we have.
Does anyone on the committee have any questions? What are areas that, perfect world, unlimited budget, do whatever you want to do? What are improvements you would make if you could?
Well, there's all kinds of resources out there. When Churchill Downs and Santa Anita had issues at their racetrack, there was different experts that came in and they checked the track out footing wise. They would have a machine that would go around the racetrack and pound it down and find out if there's any soft spots in the racetrack. if there's any issues that they could find. And I don't know all the results, but I know that they've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on these racetracks, changing surfaces, doing testing. And frankly, unfortunately, our sport is a dangerous sport and things happen. And whether a horse trips or clips heels with another horse and goes down, they're very fragile animals when you really look at their structure. And they're carrying 1,000 to 1,200 pounds on legs that are no bigger than your and I arm, type of thing. So it's unfortunate that there are incidences. I don't know. I'm sure that in some cases, some of that testing could find some things wrong with racetracks. I'm not saying that they can't. So there's, it's just how much money can you or have you to throw at it to see if there is really a problem, or if it's the animal itself. Is it structural, or is it just purely an accident, of a dangerous sport that we have.
Thank you. Connie?
I just wanted to inform everyone that Mike Twiggs is trying to listen in through a phone next to us. So he's now here to give feedback if we need it.
Excellent. Thank you, Connie. I did notice in the Churchill Downs ISA report that I don't think they found any remarkable findings when they examined that track. And I've just glanced at this, so if I'm getting something wrong, again, I didn't. I just happened to notice that. Sorry, it's pulling up.
Shall I go on to the
Navigating
next
the
one?
computer and yes, please.
Yeah, so the next one is create a blue ribbon committee to review data and make recommendations concerning the introduction of more synthetic surfaces to thoroughbred racing. Again, my feeling on this one is a synthetic surface, and perhaps Rod can talk about the cost, would be economically not feasible for especially the fair meets for all of our tracks. And that in fact, I believe the research has been showing, and maybe Mike can weigh in on this, and Mike, I may have to repeat what you say if they can't hear you, but it seems to me that what I've been hearing is that they're finding the synthetic is not really much better than a dirt track, provided that the dirt track is maintained correctly and there's enough sand and other elements in it. Mike, do you want to add to that?
Actually, you said exactly what I would have said. Because when they mandated those changes a number of years ago, then they came back with more studies. I think they were back in Keeneland or someplace. And they said, well, if you just swap out the soil, because synthetics break down same as the soil. So by swapping out and maintaining it and/or serve the same purpose. Now that's the last I heard. I haven't heard anything on it in a while.
Have you heard anything else, Rod?
Well, yeah, several years ago, this was the new thing. So several tracks, Santa Anita included, changed their surface. They spent $8 million on a synthetic surface. Found out that it really didn't do any good. The type of synthetic that they had in hot weather didn't work well. So they swapped back to dirt, and they spent $1 million swapping it back to dirt. So over probably a 3 to 5 year period of time, they spent $16 million on their racetrack and ended up with the same track that they had in the first place. The main thing about racetracks that I know of, dealing with it for years, is you have to maintain them. You have to keep sand on them. you have to also put organics back into them. So it's really using like somebody like Steve Wood, the expert, to come up with the track surface and what kind of track surface you have, and maintaining the track surface that you have, not particularly just changing back to synthetic. And the only synthetic track that I know is that's working fairly well is Golden Gate Fields, and they're due to close in June. But they're over on the coast. They have cooler weather. It works better for the weather that they have over there. It's not as hot, and they get a lot more rain over there. So that is the one track surface that I know that was changed years ago and has stayed synthetic. Most of the other synthetic tracks that I'm aware of have all switched back to dirt.
Okay, I'm going to go on to the next area, which is about data. And it talks a lot about how HISA is looking at different data factors and so on and so forth. And there's a number of questions that have been asked in here. And I will address some of these to talk about if they apply or do not apply to us and how so. The first one is, are there any common factors in sudden death cases that can provide some insights? Well, we have only had one of those in recent years, so I don't think there's any data that we really have. Second one is, are race distances associated with higher or lower injury rates? And Tom and Mike, maybe you have any thoughts on that, but most of our distances are pretty short. And even when we have the higher one, I couldn't find any information that correlated with that. Did either one of you?
Well, there's been a couple things over the years that's come up. The bull rings, they change leads more often. Some argue that's good, and some argue it's not. I don't know that there's a correlation there.
Do you have any thoughts, Tom? Dr. Everman?
Well, I think that interestingly, half of our fatalities at Grants Pass were quarter horses, which are all running on a straight track, and the race is over before they go around a corner. We didn't have any losses in our hook races, which were mostly quarter horses around the far turn. But we did have 3 fatalities. Let's see, we had one the first day of the HRA. One, the last day of racing, was a quarter horse. And then I think we had one other quarter horse at Tillamook that broke a shoulder, and that also was his straight race just down the chute. So while shorter race tracks, half-mile tracks, like all our race tracks in Oregon are half-mile tracks, would likely be associated with more thoroughbred injuries compared to a mile track. The races tend to be shorter, like you said, because the track is shorter. And half of our injuries end up being quarter horses. So I'm not sure we have enough information to form an opinion about that.
Yeah, I agree. The next one, is there a correlation between rain and none of our injuries in recent years have been on a rainy day? So I think we could factor that one out, oddly enough, being Oregon and all. Correlation between seal tracks. We don't run on seal tracks. Okay, this is one of the things this is another one that's up for question is, would a rule prohibiting running horses with specific poor performance metrics reduce equine injuries? And I know I've heard about this before. What they're talking about is if a horse, as I understand it, and again, I defer to the experts, if they keep having poor performance or less performance than normal, does it make sense to not let them run?
Well, in our situation, the stewards are doing that already.
Mike?
Well, I just wonder if we have issues with poor performance and we watch it like we do, and we determine it wasn't because of, a poor break or this or that, the other thing, but he gets distanced and gets on the poor performance list. If that should happen a time or two, maybe we put that horse on the vets list as well.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Some of these horses are undoubtedly bleeding, but not externally. And so it's not seen unless they're scoped, and that's not available at our tracks.
What would it take to make that available at our track?
Well, you would need to hire a veterinarian with a scope to be there during the racetracks, during the race meets. And so I know Dr. Bradley, the person I sold my practice to, has been advertising for a veterinarian just to work for him for 3 years and has not gotten an applicant yet. So since we only run for, well, Rod could answer this. I don't know how much you're running next year, but in 2023, with the fair and the commercial meet, they only ran about 20 days in Grants Pass. So I'm not sure how that's going to work exactly. It's one thing to say it, it's another thing to make it happen.
Right. But that's something you and I can discuss for sure. Go ahead.
Moving back to the data, one of the things as I was preparing for this meeting, and there may be information available that I'm not aware of, I'd certainly welcome that. I had trouble finding anything that resembled a base. So I would like to know, a horse can get real injured standing in a flat pasture with no holes. I wish they couldn't, but sometimes they do. I'd like to have some sort of reference data to compare our data, because certainly we can improve from where we've been. We know where we've been, but I don't know how safe you can make a horse just a horse. So when we're looking at ropers, reiners, all these different things that we do with our animals, I have not been able to find any kind of data on how we compare to everybody else, and I'd sure like to be able to make decisions based on that information. That's both comment and question. If anybody has any ideas, I'd sure like to hear them.
Commissioner Berry, we do have, there has been statistics on this, and that's where our goal comes from. We have a goal of 1.5 fatalities per 1,000. And the reason that goal was set is because it's between 1.4 and 1.5 per 1,000 in the general public of horses. If you take all horses worldwide or in the United States. So that is our goal. We are behind that right now. But sometimes when you have very short, we only had half a season last year. So because we only had half a season, if you have a couple of fatalities, it certainly makes it look worse than normal.
Oregon has this problem in Eastern Oregon. Gathering public health data, for example, we'll have a suicide in our county, and because we're a small county, looking at percentages is often not real helpful.
Commissioner Berry, one of the things that's not taken into account is they go off of race days. But at Grants Pass, we had over 100 days of training days that we also had horses working in the mornings, working from the gates, galloping at the track. There was hundreds of more horses on that racetrack that is never taken into account. And we had no injuries, no fatalities during training days, where some of these other racetracks, they'll take in those accounts and stuff. But it's a little unfair when you just take the race day fatalities and don't look at all of the training days that are also part of that, that those horses are on that racetrack at the same time. And so it's skewed a little bit based on just race days.
What would it take to get information? Because you're right, that does skew things. What would it take to get to take that into account?
Well, we could keep track of how many horses get on the track every single day and use that as a statistic, and how many horses work from the gate and how many horses breeze around the racetrack on a daily basis. It would take some work, but it could be done.
Yeah, I don't want to create an overly burdensome situation, but also I'd love to have good information to be looking at. And you're right, all those horses are on that track, and if their time on the track isn't getting factored, we're missing a great big section of data. I've also had the state come in to work I do and say, hey, you got to record this, you got to record that, and pretty soon all I feel like I'm doing is recording things for the state.
Yeah.
Are there ways that it could be done without making everybody in the place go, oh, Commissioner Barry, he wants us to record all this BS and it's not going to do anybody any good?
Well, I think if it helps our industry, I think it's worth doing if it helps our industry.
Okay. Well,
Perhaps
It could be as simple as starting with a clicker, just doing counts. And then my first thought was the outrider, but I really don't want the outriders worrying about counting horses, versus their real job. So,
but I have gate people at each gate every day, every morning. That's what you could do.
Yeah, they totally could. You're right.
I'd sure be interested to see that information. It seems like it'd give us a much clearer picture. It just seems like it gives us a much clearer picture to be making recommendations to the commission based on.
So perhaps we could try that if you're up to it, Rod, as a pilot this coming year for training.
We can do that.
Sweet. Wonderful. Wonderful. I'll look forward to hearing how it goes. Getting information is anytime I've ever tried to get information, there are unforeseen challenges. So yeah, do the best you can. That's very cool. Connie, do you want to take us on to the next section?
So I'm trying to make sense of these in the best way too. Injury detection, let's see, that doesn't really apply. One of them, we talked about this, and Tom and I will talk about this more offline, so I'm not going to go into detail right now. But in the past, we had not done necropsies on the horses at the fair meets, only at the commercial meets, and it's strongly recommended that we do that at all. Tom and I will discuss this later on, and I will get back to you with more information on what our recommendation is. So I'm just going to leave that one alone for now.
Very
I have
good.
a question. Can
Hmm?
I object?
Yes.
Thank you. So one of the questions they asked in that study was what was the impact on horses that had been injected and injury? And I wonder if that's a question, if that's data that we have in the horses that have had breakdowns, because it seems to me that, well, I mean, just to be frank, that is a potential way to get the heat off of a racetrack owner. To look at what other things might be going on here. And so I just wanted to throw that out there.
Tom?
Well, all of the horses that are treated in any way are required to be reported by the veterinarian who treats them to the commission veterinarian, which would be me, in a written form. I get these by email and by written report. And that has to happen within 48 hours of the treatment. Now, we do not have a mandatory stand down rule in Oregon. They do in California. They have a 14-day mandatory stand down from intra-articular injections, which might be a good idea. The problem with this, or with any of this, is that a lot of the trainers are capable of doing some of these injections on their own, or the veterinarians themselves, if they want to do any further work for that trainer, might be asked to just say that they give an intramuscular injection and not say that they put it in a joint. And in other words, whether our reports are accurate or not, we're not present when this is done. So if you're not actually present, you're relying on the integrity and honesty of those people that report to you. And if it compromises their livelihood, it could be a problem.
This is probably a really dumb question, but if in a necropsy, can you tell if a horse has been injected? Seems like you could.
Within a day.
Oh, okay. Not any further than that. Okay.
Yeah, if it had happened a week ago, you wouldn't be able to tell, especially in a joint, for example, it was broken, like at Grants Pass.
Mhm.
You know, if you have an open joint that's been shoved into the dirt, to try and determine if cortisone had been put in that joint a week before, it'd be impossible. Horses are a fragile animal. As was stated earlier, it's one of the few animals that people race because they will run until their leg breaks. And almost in all cases, the fracture does not occur in a location that you can identify a problem in a pre-race exam or in a week before exam. They're trying to protect the sore area, and so they break the other leg. And this is what usually happens with the horses. And I know that in my own practice, when I first started with the commission in 2019, we had 3 broken legs in my general equine practice. The first week I was with the commission, there were none at the racetrack. So these were horses, one was a dressage horse, 2 were just out in pasture, and they were just found with a broken leg. So it happens with horses.
Questions? Okay. Connie, do you want to bring us along then?
Okay, and again, it sounds like there's some possible room in there that we might want to look at some rules for that. Enforcement may or may not. If it's a right thing to do, I think my personal opinion is we should do it regardless of if we can enforce it or not, and try to enforce it. But that's me. Horse sales. Many have questions whether the industry would be better served if anti-doping and medication control protocols were consistent throughout the lifetime of a horse. For that reason, HISA has initiated discussion with sales companies, blah, 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 voluntary agreements for more effectively aligning and coordinating program through the lifetime of a horse. I'm not exactly sure what they're saying here, but it sounds like they're basically saying that they want to track the vet records and make sure that we know what's going on with the horse from one owner to the other. Injections, we talked about injections a bit, reporting compliance. They're talking a lot about databases, provisional suspension of racetrack accreditations, safety director. We have safety directors, regulatory veterinarians. Actually, we're doing really well here. They're required to have 2 regulatory veterinarians present during all live racing. And this is for big tracks. This is like Churchill Downs. We already have 2. We always have one on the front side and on the back side, so we've already met that. Another one is, this is one that was very interesting. Me and Karen were talking about this, horseshoe inspectors. The idea is to set rules to require tracks to employ a horseshoe inspector. And it could be something the commission could pay for, who will be responsible for inspecting every covered horse on the day of races. What are your thoughts on that? What's the, Mike, maybe we start with you.
Well, we do have a plater that hangs out at the paddock. It wouldn't probably take that much more just to add to his duties. You know, sometimes it's Benny Beckner. There's several people that's been doing it over the years.
Do you think that could be helpful?
Well, it couldn't hurt.
I think Commissioner Fowler has a question.
Oh, yes, sorry.
Thank you. It seems to me like, what are they inspecting for? There would need to be some idea of what an ideal, I mean, there's so much difference with horses' feet and shoeing, and I mean, I get, let's inspect to see if he's getting his feet done in the last
toe grab.
Did you hear they said maximum length of toe grab?
Okay. Well, that makes sense.
Whether the shoe's been damaged, you know, or if it's sprung and sticking out instead of, you know, nailed all the way around.
I think there's some
things like that.
You know, like if they've started to throw a shoe, if the shoe's not tight, which can happen. I mean, we can do the inspections in the morning. Tom can inspect them at 9 o'clock, and then they run at 2 o'clock. Well, a lot can happen to a horseshoe in that time.
We see a lot in our previous exams where there is a problem with the shoeing, and we tell the trainers, and they take care of that before the horse goes to the racetrack. I think what Mike is talking about is what you would head off is having excessive toe grabs on the shoes on a dirt track. And I think most people are aware of we have a rule about that. It's the maximum length that is allowed. And I don't think we have many people that exceed that. I haven't seen any, but it wouldn't hurt to have someone out there to inspect it for that.
You're talking about chocks on the shoe?
A grab on the front of the shoe that's going to stick down from the shoe and grab the surface of the track can also injure another horse, and it can put more leverage on the individual horse that has the toe grab. It could put more leverage on their leg to
So pass gurney issues, things like that.
Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that is in the HISA regulations, what the limit of that is, and ORC also has a regulation about that. And I have not seen people exceeding the legal limits, but it is possible it could happen.
Well, most of the injury. Oh, sorry.
Meadows, we had an individual coming over with excessive toe grabs, and his horses were scratched, and he was fined for it.
Yeah.
Okay. Assessment of, so that sounds like something that we're interested in pursuing potentially, because it wouldn't take a lot to do. We could try it again as a if everyone agrees, we could try it as a test, I'm looking for a word. I'm going to blame it on
You used the word pilot.
Pilot. Yes, thanks, Mike. As a pilot, we could try as a pilot this next year, perhaps, and see if we feel like they find anything, and if we have them investigate and they don't see anything the whole year, maybe it's not something we continue, but at least we can try it. That's a Rod?
Yeah, so we at Grants Pass we hire Benny Beckner. We pay him on a race day, every race day, for him to be at that paddock. checking and not so much checking shoes, but that could be part of his duty. But he's there to fix shoes in the paddock if we have something happen, if the horse is coming over and steps on a shoe and it's sprung or something like that. So we have somebody available that we could probably put that also on him to inspect the horses that are in the paddock, and Mike and Terry or whoever the other stewards are could help enforce that.
That sounds good to me. What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, I'd say we give it a shot.
Necropsies, we've already talked about that. Shockwave therapy, we don't allow Wait, Tom, remind me the rule on shockwave therapy. I thought we banned that in our rules, didn't we?
No, it's a mandatory 10-day stand down. Highs is a mandatory 30-day stand down. We should probably go to 30 days stand down in our rules, but it actually is not happening on the racetrack at Grants Pass because no one is licensed there or has a machine that's licensed. So it's not happening there. They would have to take it off track, in which case we have no control over when it's done or even what's done. And there's no evidence afterward that it's been done. So making a rule off track is not really in our, it's not something we can do.
Yeah, I guess the only advantage would be is if we did change it to 30 days like you had recommended, if later on someone did come to the track that had that certification, we'd already have the rule in place.
I like it. I think that's a good idea. We'd be in compliance with the current ARCI and HISA rules on that, and California rules would be the same in Oregon.
Would we need to refer that to the commission to vote on then, I imagine?
Anything that we change in rule that this group agrees with, the ORC would put together the rules and then we would bring them to the committee in January,
Okay.
to the full committee.
I don't know that we need.
That would
Oh, go
be
ahead.
it would be a matter of basically, for example, after this meeting, and you and I can talk and kind of go through the notes again. We could come up with a summary of what we've discussed and what you guys want to implement. And then you would bring that to the commission and it could be very high level. Then we would go back, myself, Karen, Dr. Everman, and our presiding steward, Mr. Twiggs, put those rules in place, and then we would formally start the rulemaking process.
Okay, so I want to make sure I'm hearing you right. We would come up with something in writing, rough draft, bring it back to this committee, and then if everyone agree, no, I'm misunderstanding you.
Yeah, no, so to make it easy, so it seems like how I'm taking this is it seems like everybody's pretty much in agreement that everything that we can do so far, we want to go forward with. If not, we need to go back and discuss them. But on the ones that we've agreed with so far, any that would require a rule change, we're going to take our team and we'll bring that directly to the full commission. I don't think we need to take the extra step of bringing it back here for the language. But instead, you as the chair of this committee, Commissioner Berry, will do a summary of some of the things that we thought we could implement so far and let them know that you've directed us to begin working on some potential language.
That makes good sense to me. Anybody have any concerns or objections to that? Okay.
So
No, I think that's a good.
After that happens, then they'll go to the stakeholders. They'll get a chance to weigh in.
Absolutely, yes.
And then if we need to modify something, I mean, we do it. But normally after we come to an agreement with the stakeholders, it goes pretty quick at that point.
And the biggest thing we want to do is if we're going to make changes, we want to do them sooner rather than later, So everybody has plenty of time before the next racing season. So there's no surprises to the horsemen.
Mhm.
I also like what Dr. Everman suggested as far as there being a stand down period in Oregon after injections as well as there is in California, the 14-day.
Let me make a note of that.
With just because I want to be sensitive to everyone's time, I think I had about an hour blocked out for this. Is that what we were planning on, correct? And I think this conversation that we're having right now really speaks to item number 4, discuss strategic initiatives to provide increased protection to our athletes. Does this sound like the plan? At least this is the next step in our process as a committee to get this together and bring it to the commission.
Why am I not able to even find my agenda at this point? Okay. Review by discuss strategic initiative to provide increased protection. We haven't even gotten there. That was just the first part. I recommend that we hit number 3 first, and that would be Dr. Everman. And then if we run out of time for more ideas that we might have, which I'm sure Dr. Everman will provide his feedback on, we may need to have a second meeting before January, just because there's so much. This is such an important topic.
I'm certainly open to an additional meeting, because I don't think that we're really going to fully get through this agenda today. Does anyone? I know everybody's time here is very valuable. Does anybody object to having another meeting before the next commission meeting?
I don't.
Not I.
Okay. Well, thank you all for giving this subject the seriousness that it deserves. I appreciate that for sure. Okay, Connie, take us along then.
Okay, then we're going to turn over to Dr. Everman, and then after that, if we have time, we'll begin to talk about some of the other ideas that staff and so on have come up with and see how realistic they may be. But to the doctor.
Well, one of the things that we have to take from this Heiser report that we're working through right now is that they actually did not come up with any specific findings. As the commissioner stated, in looking over it briefly, I read this thing word by word twice, and they actually did not come up with anything that could be attributed as, I think they were dealing with 17 deaths they looked at in this case, and they couldn't put any one factor as a linkage. So these are all just general ideas they had that are in this report, but none of them really relate to what we could do at Grants Pass that would identify these horses that died. If we look at each case individually, they're fairly explainable, but not from the standpoint that we would make a rule change and eliminate any of these deaths. So I'm not sure where you want me to take this. Did you want me to start with number 4, the veterinary protocols, or you already went through some of these?
No, we're back. I'm back on the agenda now. It says review final findings of recent injuries at Grants Pass Downs.
Well, you know, the interesting thing about those is the last day we had a quarter horse and a thoroughbred that both broke down fetlock injuries that were not things that had any history in an encompass, nor did they have any findings on previous examinations of a problem with those areas. One race was short, it was 400 yards, and it broke down on the backstretch when it was slowing down. And it might be attributable slightly to the way the jockey was slowing it down, but we don't know that. And it was certainly after the race. And then the other one was a thoroughbred that broke down the backstretch and they had similar injuries. One fetlock, not a fetlock that was injured that we saw on a previous exam, and or that there was any history on Encompass as far as a horse being injured in the past or having time off or being injected or nothing like that. One horse was 5, one was 3. And then in the 2 weeks before that, we had 2 horses injured in the same race. One horse went down, broke a cannon bone. And this was one of the suggestions I had made to you, Connie, I believe, was that we not allow horses to run that are on a vet list in any other state, because we had a new racing secretary this year. And this horse that broke the left front cannon bone halfway between the fetlock and the knee had an open injury there that had been in the mud. And there was a piece of its cannon bone on the racetrack. And this horse was not surgically fixable. It was definitely going to be euthanasia. The horse went down. The other horse that was injured ran over it. They were running, there was 4 horses in the field. They were running 3rd and 4th. The 3rd place horse broke down and went down on the far turn. And the other horse ran over it and broke its shoulder. And one jockey was injured. He'd been previously injured, had a plate in his head, and he was fairly severely injured, but was released, I think after a week in the hospital, was sent home, and with no long-term issues that I'm aware of. Anyway, there's no one factor that adds up with these that we could have done something different or identified these. The one horse that broke down had actually run once before already at Grants Pass, and it had run 2nd in that race. And so it ran well. And then it was scheduled to race and get off the Washington vet list if it ran well the day we were closed due to smoke. So that race was canceled and it did not run. And then it ran the 2 weekends before the end of the meet. So I think it was October 1st, maybe, I can't remember the date. Anyway, it broke a cannon bone and it was on the x-ray list at Emerald Downs for the right front fetlock, and it broke the left front cannon bone. So it was probably trying to avoid pain in the right front fetlock. So the only suggestion I would make there, and we already have this rule in place, stewards and racing secretary have to waive this in order to allow this to happen. But we basically have reciprocity with all these other state jurisdictions. Rod Lowe would probably be the one that would know the most about this. And that basically if a horse is on a vet list in another state or jurisdiction, that they are not allowed to run in Oregon. And this was allowed this fall in Oregon with quite a few horses. And that would have been the only thing I could see that would have avoided 2 of our injuries right there. The one horse going down, breaking the cannon bone, and the other horse running over it. Probably would not have been injured if it had not run over a down horse. So Rod, could you address that a little bit as far as being on a vet list in another state and running in Oregon?
Yeah, I'm not aware that we have that ability, but I can, if we do, I think that's, that is something that we certainly should look at and keep track of.
We do enjoy reciprocity with other jurisdictions. And the situation this fall was there was a mix-up between racing secretaries from here at Emerald and there at Grants Pass about why these horses were on the list. Well, they didn't make the pre-race. Well, in Washington, they automatically put them on the vet list if they missed their pre-race. So I think it's Dr. Everman that talked to Dr. Friedman that said, well, okay, we don't know all the circumstances. If the horse does good in the pre-race check, then he's allowed to run, but draw blood, and then that'll suffice as a work. And then there were a couple other horses that were entered, but I pulled the entries because they were on a best list elsewhere. Now, if there were more, I was never aware of it. But Doctor, you said there was quite a few.
Well, there weren't quite a few. There were several. That Queen Breezy horse was actually on Encompass requiring x-rays of the right front fetlock. I called Dr. Friedman about that because he didn't say what the x-rays were required of. And so I called him and asked him, and he said that the x-rays were required of the right front fetlock. That was sore and it failed on an attempt to work off the Fed list in Washington. At that point, it had already run at Grants Pass and ran second and passed previous exam and looked fine and was looking good. And it's one of those that I think there's a high likelihood that it was injected, either without our knowledge, because we have no record of it being injected at Grants Pass. So either the trainer could have done it or he could have taken it off the track and had it done, and then they're not required to report to us. So it's a problem. I think requiring a 14-day stand down is a good idea, but I do think that has severe limitations.
All right. So what I've heard from this is we have some takeaways already, and I will write them up and have them for the next meeting. These are the things that we've already covered, more or less, just to make sure that we all agree on it. And then we will start my recommendation. This is my recommendation, of course, to you, Commissioner, is that we start back with discuss strategies and initiative to provide increased protection. That's other recommendations we have. And one of the things that I'd like to provide before the next meeting is a list of what medications that we allow compared to other tracks in the ARCI and HISA. And I recommend that we maybe have 2 hours for that call because I think we still have a lot to go over. Is there a specific date and time that you'd like to do the next one?
Oh, that's a good question. We need to do it for
Sometime in December,
January.
perhaps?
So sometime December. Do Tuesdays seem to work for people all right?
It's
How
between
about,
the two commissioners. You guys have the most important schedule.
well, that's very kind of you, Connie. I don't know if that's true, but that's very kind of you. How about the 12th or the 19th? Oh, does the 19th cut it too close to the holiday?
Well, I'm gonna
12th
put a wrench in things because I'm scheduled to start trials both of those Tuesdays in December. Honestly, even though it probably doesn't work for anybody else, a Monday would be, I'd be more guaranteed not to be in trial. I could
Mondays
I could do the 5th of December if that would work. I don't have a trial scheduled that Tuesday.
Or we could look at Monday, which actually is probably better for me because the 5th I'm out of town.
Oh, no. Mondays and Wednesdays, I have obligations every week, unfortunately.
Let's look at
But
the
the
5th
fifth
then.
the 5th would work for me if that can work. I apologize.
I'll make it work.
Oh, you're good.
Tom and Mike, are you available on the 5th?
Well, I'm not looking at a calendar, but I can't imagine why I couldn't be.
I'm retired.
You're not retired, you work for us.
Yeah, well, this is my only obligation.
Commissioners, I'm the only thing that I can't realize I'm not a member, but Rod and I will be in Tucson on the 5th of December for the Racing Industry Conference. So obviously we're both very interested in attending this particular committee meeting.
Well,
What if we did it during lunchtime? Randy,
That depends. I'd have to look at the agenda down there because some of their lunches are, you know, what you've been there. They're not actually lunches.
okay, let's look at a different day then.
would the 7th, well, Thursday maybe, would that be an option?
Not for Connie.
What about a Friday? First or the 8th or we probably don't want the 22nd.
I could make the 1st or the 8th. Where it would work, I think. Let me look real quick here. Yeah, the 1st or the 8th would be fine for me if other people could make those days work.
Dr. Epperman,
Yeah, either one's good with me.
Mike,
Yep, same answer as before.
let's go with the 1st.
I like that. I
Pick a
like that.
time.
Same time, 11:30. Does this work for people? I can do any time that day.
Works for me.
Okay. 11:30, we'll plan on reserving 2 hours for it on the 1st of December. And we're at 12:31. Anybody have anything real important they want to squeeze in before we adjourn? All right. Thank you all. I appreciate it. This is a great group of folks to be working with. I look forward to seeing you all again on the 1st.